Coming up, some beautiful wood scales for my Formax Scout. I get a Smatchet finally in my collection, and then we're going to talk about emotional support knives. This is the fixed blade update. I'm Bob DeMarco. This is the Knife Junkie podcast.
Welcome to the Knife Junkie podcast, your weekly dose of knife news and information about knives and knife collecting. Here's your host, Bob the Knife Junkie DeMarco.
Welcome back to the show. One of my favorite comments from this past week was from someone who raised my ire, a youngin', who says, "Man, everything in this podcast is so old school. I listen without even seeing the knife or seeing the video, except when he announces a knife. Then I do a quick look. So everything sounds like an old radio show," says Thales Castellano 317. Well, Mr. Castellano, I had a curmudgeonly response, but hey, man, let's face it. This is what my response was. I said, there are plenty of great channels where you can check out the latest and greatest new knives on the market. And I would say Stasa, I would say Knives, these guys. But that's never been my thing. But the price of admission here is free, so stop complaining. And I stand by that. I guess I'm too old at this point to accept criticism about this show. I mean, you can criticize me and you can criticize my collection, but the show is what the show is. And we are not showing off everything that is pumped out of the factories as they come. So, Mr. Castellani, sorry I haven't pleased you here. And sorry if I sound like an old-timey radio show there, Busta. But, that's what we're here for. We're here for the cool stuff, whether it's old or new. So thank you for commenting. I might sound like an old fart, but really, I love that you watched the show and that you commented. And one and all, thank you for watching and commenting. And that said, let's get to a knife pocket check.
What's in his pocket? Let's find out. Here's the Knife Junkie with his pocket check of knives.
So in my front right pocket today, I had the Cold Steel Formax Scout, and I've been carrying this quite a bit since I got these beautiful Bocate wooden scales from Alien Scales. Let me show you their sticker, their logo. Alien Scales. So this is Rob Penna of Snaggletooth Tactical. The Snaggletooth Tactical MF, the pocket catch, the wave-like pocket opener. That a lot of us have. You can put that on any blade that has removable thumb scales, and it will catch on your pocket as you remove it and open it. Well, when he has extra time on the mills, he's been making some beautiful scales for knives, and the Formax Scout is chief among them. And so these scales he sent to me, they are beautifully milled, perfectly fit my Formax Scout, and have totally resuscitated my love for this knife. And I got this knife thinking I should have it, and I really liked it. However, I didn't carry it that much. They have those Grivery scales and whatnot. But with the wooden scales, I gotta say, just perfect. I love this. They feel great. They go smoothly in and out of pocket, and they fit every hole and divot perfectly. So when you're putting them on, these scales went on super quick. And so I've been carrying the Formax Scout a lot recently. It's like when I carry a large cold steel folder, it's rarely this. It's something longer. But this still as a 4-inch bladed cold steel, and I have plenty cold steel folders at 4 inches. This has always felt much larger. But with these scales on, it's like a luxury item. So super hot on that. Thank you, Rob, for those scales, and I highly recommend you go check them out. Gotta say, per his instructions, they are catch as catch can. He does only make those scales when he has extra time on his mills. He's mostly making snaggletooth stuff, the pocket catch, the rings, and that kind of thing. So do go check those out. Next up, I had in my pocket one that I used to carry all the time and just use all the time, but haven't in quite a while. And that is the case just jackknife. That's all it's called, the Case jackknife. This one with black Delrin. It's got a main clip point blade, and then it has a smaller pen blade. And I got this, I remember, at Dick's Sporting Goods years ago when they used to carry case knives. And I had never seen this model and haven't seen much of it since, though they do have this in the let's see what CV lineup. The Texas Jack is this same makeup. You probably recognize the frame. It's the medium frame from the Stockman and a couple of other knives. Had this in the bottom of my pocket. It's so light. It's so small, especially compared to that Formax Scout. So a great little knife. And that one really got used a lot back in the day. Back in my a different time, let's just say. Next up in my pocket, this had to do with that different time, my brass Zippo. Again, I've been carrying my my brass Zippo with me. I've been carrying the pipe Zippo a lot recently because I've been smoking a pipe a lot recently. But I decided to go for this because it's my favorite of all my old Zippos, and because it's pure brass. The new ones are kind of brass coated, or they almost feel like they're coated with a film. But this is straight brass from 1987 in high school when I was sneaking cigarettes. Sorry, mom and dad, if you're watching. But so I got that then. Just so you know, I always liked the lighters better than the cigarettes themselves. So had that in my pocket today. Did not smoke a pipe though. On my waistband, horizontally front scout, I had the Gross Motor Gear Mamushi. Sean Old is the knife maker. Look at that beauty. You've got the Tsukamaki wrap. You've got a black twine underneath it, and then between the two, you have that golden serpent Minuki. A Mamushi is a serpent. It's a venomous snake, and so it is. The Minuki is, content relevant, we'll say. This is the larger size. I have a smaller one I've been carrying in the waistband quite a bit, but I've kind of moved over to this larger version. It's only larger by about a 1/4 inch, but it's such a sweet knife. I love it, and I really like it horizontally front. You can check out Gross Motor Gear on Instagram, gross_motor_gear. And you can check out the Sean Old podcast that we just put up. It's 584. It's a great show. He's a very interesting dude and a martial artist, really knows what he's talking about. And so makes these excellent fighting knives. I'm sorry, that was 583. TheKnifeJunkie.com/583 is the Sean Old episode. Lastly, for emotional support today, in my bag, I was carrying the special edition TKell Knives FMF with the Gadsden snake and Don't Tread on Me on the front, and We the People on the other side. Look at that. Frogman Tactical is the designer of this knife. They've done a couple of collaborations, I think 3 collaborations with TKell Knives, and he's been popping up in my feed a lot lately. He's got a lot of really cool, he being Frogman Tactical guy. I'm not sure what his name is, but he's a former Navy SEAL, and he does a lot of videos for you and I, the sheepdogs, the regular folk out there who care about their own security and maybe community security. And he goes through a lot of tactics and just maybe mindset things that people who didn't serve as Navy SEALs might want to know in terms of how to protect their family, how to protect their home, what to think about, how to act, that kind of thing. So I'm really like this one. He's done the Gideon 3 and also, I can't remember what the other one was called, something Ridge, Taylor's Ridge. I think that was him. But check these out. So we got the TKell FMF, or TKell Knives FMF, the Gross Motor Gear Mamushi, the medium jackknife by Case Knives, and the Formax Scout wearing the alien scales. Again, that is the alien scales. Let me show you his logo one more time. And you can check this out by going to Snaggletooth Tactical online. Snaggletooth Tactical. All right. Before we get to Knife Life news, I just want to urge you to check us out on Patreon. We do a monthly giveaway for Gentleman Junkies. That's the high tier of support on Patreon. There are other tiers of support, and you get interview extras. That's my favorite part of what we offer because we have great and engaging interviews on this show. But if you want to hear more, once the knife maker lets their hair down, so to speak, and you can get some inside scoop on knife makers, the knife biz, and all that. So go to the knifejunkie.com/Patreon, check out the different tiers, see what we have to offer, or scan the QR code on the screen right there. Again, that's the knifejunkie.com/Patreon.
Adventure Delivered, your monthly subscription for hand-picked outdoor, survival, EDC, and other cool gear from our expert team of outdoor professionals. TheKnifeJunkie.com/BattleBox.
You're listening to the Knife Junkie podcast. And now here's the Knife Junkie with the Knife Life news.
Okay, so first in Knife Life news, just announcing that there's a new batch of Chris Reeve Knives Sebenza 31s coming out, and they are now at KnivesShipFree. KnivesShipFree is a great purveyor of knives online. I think we might have a KnivesShipFree affiliate link somewhere, but I just want to let you know that the new Sebenza 31 is out, and it is a big batch of them at KnivesShipFree. They have the plain Jane style with the clip point. Yes, I'm saying clip point. It's not a drop point. If you really look closely, they have the plain Jane in the clip point, in the Tanto, and then they have a number of not carbon fiber, micarta inlays that are just beautiful. If I had a spare $545 rattling around in my pocket, I would get the red micarta. This one that you're seeing on screen is a mere $500, but I got to say, it is worth it. And you don't hear me say that too much, especially for a folder. But I've been carrying my Chris Reeve knives recently, and they are superlative. So this is one of the most celebrated production knives of all time, designed by Chris Reeve, who is a South African. He was a South African motorcycle racer. And while he was on compulsory military duty, he came up with the idea to start making knives because what they were handed was crap, basically. And so he started making fixed blade knives, survival knives, hollow handled knives. And then he started making the Sebenza in 1989, the year I graduated high school. And maybe some of you weren't even born then, but I think we have an older crowd here, a more mature crowd here. The Sebenza 21 was the flagship for quite some time due to its simplicity of design. It to all of our eyes looks just like the 31. Here, the 31 has some changes we'll talk about in a second, but really known for its robustness and its tolerances. Everything on the Sebenza was so tight in terms of tolerances that there was never any blade wiggle. And when you disassembled it, and still do, it's very difficult to disassemble because all of the pylons and such are so tightly fit that you have to perfectly pull it off with perfect pressure on all ends at the same time for it to come apart easily. And that inspires confidence and also makes for a super strong knife. Also, Chris Reeve totally pioneered the frame lock, and that was mostly in the Sebenza model. And he also pioneered the S30 line of steels, and then consequently incidentally, the S45 VN style. So S30V, S35 VN, and S45 were all pioneered by Chris Reeve with the company to actually make that steel. So the Sebenza 31 now out, and I mean, it's been out for a while, but a new batch, and that's That doesn't happen too often. New big batch over there at KnivesShipFree. The Sebenza 31 introduced the ceramic ball lock interface, which we saw with the Umnumzan, and very, very much a request from Chris Reeve Knife owners. They wanted that Umnumzan feature brought over into the Sebenza when they redesigned it in 2020 for the 31. That's 31 years after it was brought out. They integrated that ceramic ball lock. So that and MagnaCut brings you a superior Sebenza. If you're interested, go to KnivesShipFree. And by the way, you better do it quickly. I was just on there right before recording, and they have about 6 left, I think, or 7, something like that. So get over there if you want a 31 and you've been saving your shekels. This knife is definitely worth the money. All right, next up from Tops Knives, one we've been seeing a lot in Knife Life news recently because every year they come out with a bunch of new knives. This is a mini version of the El Chete. It is so the original had a 12-inch blade. It's a bellied cleaver style outdoor knife, real nasty chopper. But this one is a pared down version. And if you're looking at the screen right now and you see this miniaturized version of the giant El Chete in the model's hand here, you'll probably notice that it is just by a percentage a pared down version of the knife. Like, it doesn't look like they've reshaped or resized the handle to match the new blade size. It looks like it was just reduced altogether. It's a 5.5-inch 1095 blade here. And it is a real go-to sort of chopper, cutter, and go-to camp knife. But still, in this small 5.5-inch version of it, it's still going to maintain all of those roles. I would say, though, for chopping, you might want to add a lanyard because that's a tiny handle. The handle, as I said, proportionately shrunk down. You got full tang there. You've got green canvas micarta, pretty beautiful. A very light 7.5 ounces with the Kydex sheath. Comes with a belt loop, but you could just drop that in your backpack too, and it would be good to go. This one is now available. So if you like the El Chete, but it was a little bit too much knife for you, go check out the El Chete Mini. All right, next up from Terrain 365 and Patrick Ma. He's the guy who is in charge of all of the, he's one of the co-founders of Terrain 365, and he's the creative director there, so he designs all these knives. And he came up with this new one called the Narwal. And if you look at it, it's definitely in the design language of Terrain 365. A pretty cool looking knife. This one, and I am quoting here, is inspired by the simplicity and ergonomic balance of the capsule shape, So that sort of lozenge-shaped long oval. He was inspired by that shape. Pretty meta. I appreciate it. This one here has a fully symmetrical 3.5-inch Teravantium blade. And when I say symmetrical, when you look at the grinds, obviously it's not. But when you look at the silhouette of the blade, it's symmetrical. You've got a long fuller down the center of both sides of the blade, and a we'll call that a saber grind flat there. So completely rust proof is this knife, and that's kind of the USP, the unique selling proposition of most Terrain 365 knives, because they use titanium, which is rust resistant or totally rust free, and then this Teravantium, which is a proprietary dendritic cobalt alloy. Say that a couple of times. It is a proprietary dendritic cobalt alloy. So it doesn't rust at all. So this would be great for all sorts of marine and nautical applications. It's got a very low profile flipper that you can open with your thumb or your forefinger. And I do appreciate that. And if you're looking at the screen right now, you can see that flipper. It is quite quite low profile, but broad. So there are lots of places for your finger or your thumb to grab onto that. This one is available now, and I have not had any 365 knives, or terrain 365 knives, but my good buddy Dave has, and he loves them. And everything I hear about them is very, very positive. So if you like that shape and you need something for a humid environment, man, definitely check that out. All right, last up, I want to talk about a little thing here from KnifeRights. And maybe some of you who have purchased knives on PayPal have noticed, or maybe you run a business and you've noticed this with the banks. But a lot of banks and monetary companies do not like knives and weapons. But KnifeRights has a new bill that is changing all of that. And I'm going to read directly from the KnifeRights website. KnifeRights is first in the national bill to prevent banks from discriminating against persons and companies involved in the manufacture, distribution, wholesale, supply, or retail of knives. State Bill 1027 has been signed by Governor Brad Little. The new law this is in Idaho, by the way. The new law becomes effective on July 1st. KnifeRights is taking the lead in protecting the knife industry from the adverse effects of anti-knife sentiment that unfortunately exists among some banks in this country. Numerous members of the knife community have raised the issue of financial institutions debanking and otherwise shutting down our community from their services, says Doug Ritter. A number of states have taken up this debanking issue, and recently, bills were introduced in Congress, the Fair Access to Banking Act and Protecting Privacy in Purchases Act. It's past time for knives to be included in this discussion. So basically, the point is banks are trying to make it difficult for knife makers to do business, whether it's a small knife maker, custom knife maker, just trying to sell their wares and make a living, or bigger companies like Chris Reeve Knives that we mentioned before, who are larger, more established companies who are having difficulties in banking. That's a terrible thing. We saw that happen in Canada with the during COVID with the truck convoy and people being debanked up there. We've seen it here when we try to buy a knife using PayPal and people say, don't mention that you're buying a knife in the PayPal comments. So this is a state bill that is going the distance to try to assuage that and get rid of it altogether. And I'm wholeheartedly for it. These are just good people making a tool we all need and use on a daily basis. So if this is compelling to you, go to kniferights.org and see what you can do about sending them a little bit of money to keep them going, because if it weren't for KnifeRights, we would all be trying to claw back a whole lot more of the knife rights we've lost since the Civil War. So definitely go check them out. Doug Ritter is a great guy, and he is fighting the good fight for all of us. All right, before we get to the state of the collection, I just want to say, check out the newsletter. We have a great newsletter, and actually one of the comments that I didn't put into the comment section today was that one of our Steadfast viewers signed up for the newsletter because of my push last time. So I'll just say the newsletter, it comes out pretty much on a weekly basis, and I write some 3-paragraph piece about something in the knife world or in my collection that is concerning to me, always accompanied by a couple of beautiful photos. But the real purpose of the newsletter is to get you to sign up so that in case we get cut off from our favorite platforms here because of things like knife debanking and that sort of sentiment, we will still have a way to reach out to you, and we will still have a knife community going. So go to theknifejunkie.com/newsletter, sign up, give us your email address so we can send you a newsletter, open it up. Don't read it if you don't have the time, but just open it up, and you will have done a lot for this channel. So again, that's theknifejunkie.com/newsletter. Again, theknifejunkie.com/newsletter.
Want to sell your custom knives online? With LaunchCart, you can easily create your own e-commerce store. No coding required. LaunchCart is designed for knife makers like you, with built-in tools to showcase your craftsmanship, manage orders, and grow your brand. It's fast, flexible, and even includes low-cost payment processing to help you keep more of your profits. Start your online knife store today at TheKnifeJunkie.com/launch and turn your passion into a business.
And now that we're caught up with Knife Life news, let's hear more of the Knife Junkie podcast.
Also, I must add, LaunchCart is an American company, so definitely check them out. Okay, so first up, a very exciting addition to my collection. Maybe it's a little bit old school, and maybe this might get your knickers in a twist, but check this out. I finally got this in my collection. This is the Cold Steel Desperado, an old part of the Vaquero lineup. This is no longer in production. It should be, or at least a fixed-bladed version of the Vaquero blade should be in production, if you ask me. But I made a trade with Strings with a Z. He's a musician, a great dude who tours the country playing his music with his wife. And he is a contributor to Thursday Night Knives. He joins us every week. And I was complaining about how I never got a Desperado. And he said, I have one. Let's make a trade. We did make that trade, and this is the result. I'm so happy about this. And it looks like very, very minimal use over the years from Strings of this beautiful Desperado. When you look at this, you can see it's the slightly older school version of the Vaquero blade. These days, it looks a little bit different, but it's the same S-curve fighting blade with the midline tip. Nowadays, the tip is just a little bit higher, just a little bit more midline. But I absolutely am so smitten with this knife. It's got a craton handle, so that grippy rubberized handle. But I got to say, with the craton, over the years, and I've had, one of my oldest knives is a cold steel with the craton handle. It does not disintegrate over time. I always thought it was going to start to get gummy and gooey in hand. It just doesn't. It's a very stable material. And this is an older knife, probably 25 years old, and still feeling great in hand. Fits the hand beautifully. That egg shape really gets nestled into the palm, but there's nothing on the puño side to get disarmed with or get caught on your clothing or whatever, when you're drawing it for your knife duel. Very, very comfortable in the hand. I'm not as happy with it in reverse grip. Seems like there's a lot less leverage in reverse grip, but in the forward grip, it is outstanding. And I think it's worth bringing back out. I think Cold Steel should. And if they do, add a little jimping right here, and that would make it even more secure in hand. You got the beautiful 5 little and 1 big scoop there in the serrations. I love Cold Steel serrations, and just to be a little trifling, I'm not as pleased with how they look as, say, the Spidey Edge, but man alive, do they perform well. Great sheath on this Desperado, fits in there really, really well, goes in and out really well, and, that's not easy to do with such a deeply recurved blade. So I'm very pleased with the whole package. Thank you so much, Sean, for this great trade. And we have another trade in the works, and I'll show you that when it comes in. So that's the Cold Steel Desperado. A long time. I mean, I've needed that knife in my collection for a long time. Huge fan of the Vaquero blade shape. I have almost every version of it. And this really is one of the most difficult versions to get into the collection. All right, next up, and this will segue right into the emotional support knife topic. But right here, I have a new one, and I saw this on Fireboy's Cutlery channel. I love this thing. This is a Smatchet from APOC Survival. APOC Survival is a Cass Iberia company, and the Demko brothers have a lot of knives, and Mike Wallace, who is associated with them, have a lot of designs on this website and from this company. This indeed is a Mike Wallace design, and it is the Smatchet survival knife. Now, they call it a survival knife, but the Smatchet historically was a weapon designed by Colonel Fairbairn, the guy who designed the Fairbairn Sykes fighting knife right to my left ear here. Double-edged dagger. Well, this is a double-edged, big, fat blade meant for melees. This is for fighting in trenches and for fighting on the battlefield. And yes, it is wide and shovel-like and also like a hatchet. You could use it for a number of different purposes, but really it was designed for fighting. And to me, I really like purpose-driven knives and tools. And to me, I just like that it's meant for fighting. You do have to be careful, though. It is absolutely double-edged, so it is razor sharp on both sides. That's a 9.5-inch D2 blade, and then a micro-milled G10 handle here. You have an integral guard and a bit of a gladius-style pommel here. Just a great knife, and I have to say, not so hard on the wallet. It was not as expensive as I thought it might be, so I jumped on it. This was definitely a impulse purchase, and I'm glad I followed my impulse. I'm going to put it down. It's got a little bit of oil still on the blade, and I don't want to get it on my leather here, but it's really, really wickedly sharp. And if you've watched Choir Boy's Cutlery, he went out in his swamp, avoiding the skunk apes, hopefully there down in Florida. But he and his buddy were out there chopping stuff, and it ricocheted off something and hit his buddy on the top of the head. Oof. And he happens to have a shaved head, so you could see it did a little bit of damage. So you got to be careful with this one. It is double-edged. Maybe just think of it as a sword or as a fighting blade, and you'll be in good stead with this thing. All right, I'm going to segue directly into the emotional support knife and leave this out here. But before I do, I just want to remind you that if you like t-shirts, cool knife-themed t-shirts, or anything else, you can go to theknifejunkie.com/shop and get one of these beautiful designs that Jim creates. He creates a lot of great taglines for knives and then really cool designs. And this week, it's Knife Collector. And I have to say, we are in grilling season or Blackstone season, if you're like me, and you might want to get an apron so that when you're hanging out at the grill and people are coming, you're holding court when you're at the grill, people come to you and talk to you. You don't have to circulate. So when you're holding court, you want people to know what you stand for, and you stand for knives. We all have different political beliefs. We all have different religious and spiritual beliefs and feelings, but we can all agree on knives and how essential they are. So you want people to know that, and you don't want people to bring up politics or religion at your party. You want them to bring up knives. So get one of these aprons or a t-shirt or hat or anything else we have over at theknifejunkie.com/shop. All right, so this APOC Smatchet, which I still have out on the mat, has been, since I got it about a week ago, a huge emotional support knife, and huge both in size, but also I've been carrying it a lot. And by carrying it, I don't mean wearing it. It's been in my backpack quite a bit, so that in case it all goes down at work, I have something I can draw and use. I'm going to rest this on the handle of a different knife over there, but let me show you the sheath. The sheath is an excellent micarta sheath. It's got a removable drop loop here, not a Velcro loop, so it's not going to come off in the field at all. You do have to undo your belt to get it on, but I am really pleased with this. I am not going to take off the drop loop. I frequently do that. This is a very large sheath. Let's see, tip to tail or dorsal to pectoral. Let's see. Yeah, about 4 inches. So it's a big sheath. It's a pancake sheath going around a very wide blade. And so I am not removing the drop loop because I would not be putting that in the waistband or doing anything but dangling it from my belt. This would be a great one. I feel like this would be a great one for posting near the front door next to your shotgun. So if anyone decides to break in, you've got this and something more potent than this, but just an awesome melee weapon here. This is a weapon. And yes, none of us really use knives as weapons these days. And if we do, they're much smaller because we're in the military or law enforcement. But as a historical nod and as a last-ditch home defense tool, I feel like this Smatchet would do great. And having this in hand, I really want to get an old school Smatchet. I believe in 1980, Colonel Fairbairn kind of opened up the, that was just before he passed away, he opened up the rights to make these on a broader scale. So go check out, I think Boker makes a Smatchet that you can every once in a while get. And also Cold Steel made a Smatchet machete single-edged that might interest you. All right, another favorite emotional support knife recently. And let me just preface all of this by saying that emotional support knife, the concept, started with fidgeting. I started carrying emotional support knives for this fidget factor, and they were all usually small and fidgety folding knives, like, say, this 6-skill from Civivi that I recently posted a review of. By the way, I love it. But my emotional support lately has not been coming from nervous fidgeting. It's been coming from knowing that I have a large, very good to go fixed blade knife near me. Now, it's not on my person, but they're always near me. So that's how my emotional support knife has evolved. And by evolve, I don't mean has changed from one thing to another. I guess I have to say, like everything in my collecting, we're following a sine wave. So I'm sure I will come back to the fidget as my emotional support. But right now, the emotional support I need is knowing I have a go-to-war knife with me. And so this one has been a big one in the backpack recently. This is the Big Bear, the Big Bear Classic from Cold Steel Knives. And man alive, I love this thing. This is based on the sub-hilt fighter from Bob Loveless, a pattern that is most beloved among fixed blade knife makers. This is the sub-hilt right here, and this allows for two things. First of all, easy extraction. Once you thrust this double-edged, long, slender clip point blade into something and need to retract it, this sub-hilt gives you something to pull against besides the pommel to ensure that you retract the blade. It also gives you this. If you're in a knife fight and you're doing this kind of motion, it gives you a sort of trigger point that you can, gives you positive retention when you're flicking and doing snap cuts or this sort of back cut. It gives you something extra to hold on to, allowing you to free up these 3 fingers here to give you some flexibility. Now, you don't want to do too much freeing up. You want to hold onto your knife tightly, but every once in a while, you need some flexibility to do certain moves, and pinching this sub hilt gives you that flexibility. There's nothing that annoys me more in movies when I see people do this, when they flip their knife around or their sword around and they open up their hand. I was taught in Kali, you give yourself train wrist suppleness so that you can do that sort of twirl without relinquishing your full grip. So that's what that sub hilt does. Plus, this one has the beautiful leather sheath with the sharpening stone. I love this. Now, if you want to get this knife, I'm sure it's a great one. This was made in Taiwan. If you want to get the new Cold Steel sub hilt, it's going to have a Kydex sheath. And I don't know. I just wanted to, I held out for the leather one and got it on eBay. Next up, and the leather one is old. That's why I say held out. Next up is the Station 9 Partisan. This is Station 9's version of a very common style of knife used in World War I, especially by French troopers who were taking butcher knives and chef's knives and altering them for trench fighting. So this very much looks like a butcher's knife. You have that very neutral style handle with the bird's beak, and then it definitely in typical French fashion, the blade being wider than the pinch point of the handle. So the blade itself is the guard. So this does look like a chef's knife, but then look at that long swedge. This is out of 1095 blade steel. It is not currently in production with from Station 9. They keep kind of making new models, and I love that because I love all their new models. But I strongly recommend they go back to making this or put this back into production, because every time I show it, people comment on how much they like it and would like to get it. I think I got this right at the tail end of production of this knife. It's got a burlap micarta. I'm sorry, canvas micarta scale, nice and smooth, with these pass-through copper grommets. So you can put a D-guard style lanyard on there that goes over your hand to keep it in your hand. I also put a Ranger band here because I like a little of that grippiness to it. So it's a pretty simple looking knife. It looks kind of like what we all have in our kitchen, but definitely bred for fighting. So I really like this. I also love the sheath. Now the sheath is Kydex, but it also has this wrap around leather belt loop. And it's an odd looking belt loop at first blush, but really the belt passes through this slot and then over the sheath. It doesn't just hang on the sheath on the belt like this. The belt comes underneath and passes over. So it rides real close and tight to your body. Of course, the thinner the belt, the more of a cant you can get on it. So I do prefer wearing this with a thinner belt so that I can get a nice angle on it. Excuse me. So that is the Station 9 Partisan. Such a cool knife. And by the way, it also looks like the blade shape of the knife in the Halloween movie, at least on the movie poster. All right, next up, this one has, I've kind of pulled this one out. I hadn't carried it or had it with me for a while, but sort of saw it anew in my collection and have been putting this in my backpack quite a bit recently. This is the Cortada from DeMarco and Fox Knives. It was distributed by Russian Blades. But this thing, they only made 500 of these and 500 of a smaller version of this, which they call the Dagger. But I would take exception to that definition. But this is a Gununting style knife. So a downward tip and a downward edge. Interesting thing about this one, though, is that most Gununtings have a curved edge. This one has a straight edge. It's just extremely downward pointed and Warncliffe in spine style. So you get the benefits of a curved blade without the hassle of sharpening a curved blade, if you find that to be a hassle, which I do not. Up here, there's a swale that looks like it might be for the thumb. And yes, of course, you could use it with your thumb, especially if you have gloves. Those are pretty sharp. But I think that those are for this. I'll show you here in the main screen. They are for trapping. So if you have this in reverse, or even if you have it in forward grip, but it works better in reverse grip, and you are fighting an opponent who comes in with a sword or a knife, and you stop arm to arm, you drop this using the leverage of your thumb, and those jimps grab into the arm, and that allows you a moment of control before you release and strike or whatever you're going to do with it. But that is less for the thumb and more for control of your opponent's appendages. Beautiful knife with made by Fox with wooden handles, and these symbols here are tattoos on Doug Marcaita's arms for his culture. That's the wave. For his warrior nature and culture, that's that arrowhead. And then here, these symbolize his 3 sons. So a cool and personalized touch. There you see Doug Marcaita's maker's mark. You see 391 out of 500, and that's the Russian blades symbol there. Now, this one I lucked into because I totally slept on it when it came out and didn't jump on it, and really was sad about that I never got this. And then I met Doug Marcaita at the Texas Custom Knife Show, which revolves around the Forged in Fire brand. He was there and he had this on auction. So I got this in an auction there. A very nice leather sheath with a drop loop. Not my preferred way to carry, but if you don't like that, you can slide this part over the belt. So a beautiful knife. I really hope they come back out with this Gnunting style knife, sometimes called a hagibis, by the way. But this one is so cool, and it's been offering a lot of emotional support lately in the bag. All right, so the smallest of my recent fixed blade emotional support knives is one of the newer ones, and that is my Work Tuff Gear Steadfast. This beautiful thing, designed by Cal Richardson and made by Work Tuff Gear, has one of the sharpest edges on any knife I've ever had. It is insane. I did that folded paper cut test where you fold paper like an accordion, stand it on its end, and it just slices down. I have a short doing that. It is just crazy sharp. It's got a polished edge and a beautiful long clip point blade. It's got a thumb platform, we'll call it, not a ramp because it doesn't go up, but nice thumb platform. I wouldn't mind jimping on it, but you definitely don't need it with this super ergonomic handle. You've got a nice finger guard here that stops you from sliding up on the blade in a thrust, and then a really nice milled handle scale here, black G10. I think this came in a couple of colors like green G10 with black liners, but I got the black and white, that sort of tuxedo look I love. And if you look at it from its dorsal aspect, you'll see there's a bit of a Coke bottle, a slight palm swell, but it definitely widens out at the pommel. The pommel, speaking of which, has not only a lanyard hole, but a nice point there to wrap your thumb around if you need to use this in reverse grip. It does so really, really nicely. And there is Cal Richardson's maker's mark. I need to reach out to him. I'd love to have him on the show. Looks like a big crow flying overhead. It's a beautiful maker's mark. And man, this knife is just gorgeous. I love this blade shape. I could look at it all day. And to be 100% honest, I've only used this for making feather sticks. So very light use on this knife so far. But I see this field knife as more of a fighting knife, I have to be honest. Oh, look at me being all honest. Just as a side note, whenever anyone says honestly or to be honest, I'm always like, I don't trust you. So forget I said that. But here is the sheath itself, very broad. That's the one thing about Work Tuff Gear knives I'm not crazy about are their sheaths. Now, don't get me wrong, it has incredible retention, but it's also about the size of Texas here. It's such a big bit of landscape. I mean, you could even, not you, but the makers could even grind this back to much closer to the grommets and lose a bit of that overall size. One of these days, I'll probably make a taco sheath for it, but a taco style fold over sheath. But in the meantime, this will do just great. Also, a drop belt loop here with the Velcro and the snap. Next up, a newish one for me, and that is the Cold Steel Magnum Tanto 12. This has been going in the backpack a bit recently, and it's just a big boy. It's just a big, tall, slender drink of water, we'll say. And so it just kind of barely zips into my backpack because it's so long, but I love this thing. And one thing I love about it is how light it is. First, before I get to that, it's got that real squared off Tanto tip with the deeply hollow ground main edge and then that flat chisel tip. It is beautiful. 12 full inches of VG10 Sanmai steel. You've got an aluminum guard and persuader on the back with that skull crusher. The grippy craton handles, which just seem to go forever. But what I love about this knife is how light it is in hand. It's light and lively. You could do a lot of sort of fighting techniques where you're batting away the other blade, the incoming blade, just by going side to side. I've seen Ron Balicki and Lynn Thompson do that a lot. Ron Balicki is like a super master of Filipino Kali. Well, so is Lynn Thompson, but I think Ron Balicki kind of taught him. And so there's a lot of like this flicking away and then coming. So you're slowly flicking away an incoming knife and then coming in for a snap cut. So I like that because this blade is thin and light and hollow ground, but it's got a very thick spine. So you can move it around. The balance is right, even for a long knife like this, the balance is right north of the guard. So you can flick those incoming attacks away and then come in with a snap cut. And the beauty of that is with that squared off chisel tip and that secondary point, a snap cut is going to make a deep triangular wound. And if you do it on the forehead, it's not going to do much damage to your opponent, like if it's just a friendly knife fight, but it will leak a lot of blood into their eyes, and then you can either retreat or do whatever you need to do. But that's all theoretical. I've never done that before. So there you have it. I've only heard tell. And that secondary point on the Americanized Tanto tip is great for a snap cut. Also, the guard reminds me a lot of a samurai style Suba. It is oval in shape and protects the thumb, the forefinger, and then the sides as well. And the sheath originally was not great. It didn't fit well. And then it was sitting on the counter next to the stove while I was cooking. And I think it melted a little bit around there because now it's got much better retention. That is the Cold Steel Magnum Tanto 12. Every once in a while, I'm in a dagger style mood. And recently, I've been carrying this, dropping this in the bag quite a bit. This is the Spartan-George Raider Dagger. So designed by Les George as a tip of the hat to the Marine Raider Dagger that had a very small tenure at the beginning of World War II. But due to material deficits and the daintiness of the blade, they moved on to the M3 trench knife and then later the K-bar. But this was the Marine Raider Dagger. It looked just like this, except this one has an integral, has a full tang here, very nicely jimped full tang, and it has an integral guard. So that is a full metal guard. So if you were to take the handle scales off of this knife, the silhouette would look exactly the same, which I love. It's what a great way to make what was a dainty dagger a very stout and sturdy fighting knife here. Since I have it in this aspect, you can see it's got a deep, a big palm swell there, and then a deep recess before it widens back out at that commando style pommel. You've got jimping on the tang all the way around, so very nice gription on this knife, and then a deep knurling here on the FRN handle scales, and then that blade, that beautiful blade, made in Taiwan, and you can see the Les George logo and the Spartan Blades logo. Les George is a huge fan of the dagger. He does all these projects based on daggers. He's been doing a 1918 dagger project for quite some time, where he casts the 1918 knuckle duster in bronze and then sends it out to his knife maker friends. Matt Chase of Hogtooth Knives being one of them, Alan Elishewitz another, both Marines. And they put their own dagger style blades in the handle. One of these days, I have to get one, preferably from Matt Chase. And yeah, I just have to own one. But Les George, a maestro of the dagger, teaming up with maestros of the production knife world, Spartan blades, and making this great knife. And by the way, what a great sheath this is. All of these lashing options, and though it's wide, it seems thin with all of the slots in there. This is a cheap aftermarket in the waistband clip I put on there. It does come with your traditional dangler style belt loop. Next up, also a dagger, but this one a little bigger, almost approaching short sword status. This is the Odin Wolf Sow Catcher. Kind of a grim name, but it's a hog hunting or pig hunting knife. At least that's how it's marketed. But it's a broad, recurved dagger. And it's got these beautiful swells up by the tip that allow for great slashing. Not something most daggers are very adept at, but with those big recurve swells there and bellies on both sides, this is a great slasher. Very sharp. It's got a pretty stout blade geometry with those saber ground edges on both sides. A very thick medial ridge, punctuated by a fuller there, sometimes called a blood groove, which is kind of ridiculous to me. But the fuller there keeps it light, also makes it incredibly rigid. You've got D2 blade steel, which I am now a reconvert to. I'm loving D2 because I love watching how it performs in Peterbilt Knife Guy's nail tests. D2 seems to be superior when it comes to that test in particular. A great plastic rubberized handle. I don't know what the material is, but it's got a slight rubbery grippiness to it, but it's not overly rubbery at all. It seems like where you knurl it or cut the hatching in, you can sense the rubberiness more. I don't think that's an inlay, but it's got jimping and grip grooves all around the handle. So a really, really nice handle. I would imagine if you have a wild boar cornered by your dogs or held down by your dogs or however that works, this handle is going to drive that blade in a very sure fashion, because you have these guards and you have all this grippy surface milled in or molded in. So a great knife, got a great sheath here. Again, you've got the drop loop. The one thing I don't like is that you cannot remove it. So that loop with the Velcro and the snap is there permanently. Next up, not much needs to be said about this beauty. This is the Tops Prather War Bowie, and with my own Kydex sheath, one of the best Kydex sheaths I've ever made. But this one goes in the bag quite frequently because it's just a very solid, sturdy, and stout 1095, a long clip, nearly Spanish in nature, clip point blade. I love this knife. 9.5 inches or 9 inches of blade here, and just a beauty. You've got a coffin style handle here, so it's and like the French knives, the blade itself is the guard because it's wider than the pinch point of the handle, and then the handle widens out towards the pommel, resisting any sort of centrifugal force in a slash or chop, but then again also resisting it's going to stop you from going on the blade with that awesome wide blade guard. Also great jimping here. And I always wish this had a sharpened swedge. How wicked would that be? But it's not even close. It's pretty wide up there on the swedge. But I imagine a thinner swedge or even a double edge there would make this an even more effective knife. Jeff Prather, who I don't know why, I haven't really looked into it, but he's a very polarizing figure. A lot of people think he's a bad dude, but there's an interesting video of him and how he carries this knife in sort of samurai style, and how he uses it and flips it around using a lanyard, which I don't recommend unless you have a training option on hand. So that is the Prather War Bowie. The next two, the last two, are also Bowies. This one, the Kudaman JBK1. This is made in Spain with molybdenum vanadium steel. I can never say that M word. It's just beyond me. But a beautiful classic style Bowie knife with a straight handle. And this handle is so comfortable. It's contoured micarta, so it's rounded, but still flat enough not to turn in your hand. Even though it doesn't have a bird's beak or a coffin profile, it just stays in hand really, really well. I've used this to chop vines and small saplings, and it definitely stays in hand without any sort of handle feature that would guarantee it. A nice big guard stopping you from sliding up on that blade if heaven forbid you have to thrust it into anything. Nice hollow grind, comes to a very thin behind the edge geometry. Beautiful swedge. I just love the shape of this Bowie knife. This is a classic looking Bowie knife to me, the kind of thing you see on old book covers. And then there is the Kudaman elephant logo. Very beautiful. Made in Spain. Check out Kudaman. Check out Joker Knives. And what's the other one? Well, several really, really cool knives and great knife companies coming from Spain. I'm starting to see more from them on Instagram. And I can vouch for this knife. It is a really great knife. Also comes with an excellent sheath. Beautiful black leather with the red stitching, just like in my Ferrari. And just kidding, I don't have a Ferrari, but just a beautiful, beautiful knife and classy design there. All right, last up, one that barely fits in my backpack, similar to the Tanto, is the Cold Steel Natchez Bowie. I love the Natchez Bowie, a Musso style Bowie with a 0 ground clip, so very sharp clip, great on the back cut. This has a nice big guard and a vampire style coffin handle. And I guess I'm just sort of coining that now, vampire, meaning it looks like the coffin shaped handle from the Jack Wolf Knives Vampire with the center humps there. Really nice in hand, beautifully balanced, a little bit heavy with that 5/8 of an inch thick blade, but you know, eat your Wheaties and do a little weightlifting and it won't be that bad. This has the 4034 stainless steel. And if you're at all trepidatious about 4034 stainless steel and would rather spend the extra $150 to get 3V, before you do, I would ask you two questions. This, with its cable tang, a true bred fighting knife, do you need 3V? Are you going to be using this out in the field to baton wood? That's my first question. And second comment, I guess, is check out Jimmy Slash's review of 4034 stainless steel, where he takes a cold steel in that steel and does a lot of abuse to it. This steel can take it. Cold steel is great at taking quote unquote substandard steels and heat treating it to maximum capability. This knife gives me true emotional support, because if anyone were to ever break into my office, I'm sure they'd have a gun, and I'm not allowed to have a gun in my office. But if I could get the jump on them, this beautiful Natchez Bowie would have a great effect in stopping the threat. So that's what emotional support means to me right now. It's not so much the fidgety nature of a knife like this. It's more knowing that I have a great backup with me. What's your favorite emotional support knife? Let me know what your ESK is. drop it in the comments below. And I'd love to talk about that on the next Thursday Night Knives. We often talk about ESKs on Thursday Night Knives, and I want to get, I'd love to get a roster of things we can mention. Be sure to check out this week's interview coming out on Sunday. If you're watching this as it drops, that's episode 584. You will love it. I guarantee it. All right. For Jim working his magic behind the switcher, I'm Bob DeMarco saying until next time, don't take dull for an answer.
Thanks for listening to the Knife Junkie podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and review at reviewthepodcast.com. For show notes for today's episode, additional resources, and to listen to past episodes, visit our website, TheKnifeJunkie.com. You can also watch our latest videos on YouTube at TheKnifeJunkie.com/YouTube. Check out some great knife photos on TheKnifeJunkie.com/Instagram, and join our Facebook group at TheKnifeJunkie.com/Facebook. And if you have a question or comment, email them to Bob at TheKnifeJunkie.com or call our 24/7 listener line at 724-466-4487, and you may hear your comment or question answered on an upcoming episode of the Knife Junkie podcast.